Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where I break down a classic Goosebumps book and any episode that goes along with it. I will also be telling some of our Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit A Shocker on Shock Street. This was one I wasn't really looking forward to because my only real memory of it was hating the twist at the end, although I couldn't recall the specifics of the twist before reading it this week. It turns out my hatred for the twist was pretty justified, but there's still a decent story here for the first 27 chapters, even if the story kind of feels too much like a collection of random scenes for my taste. It's worth checking out if you haven't yet. Just go in with low expectations. Maybe it's because I use this cover image in my Goosebumps Totals each week that I've grown to like it so much, because I don't remember caring for it as a kid. It has a weird color combo going on with pale gray and yellow that doesn't really work for me, but it does make it stand out on the shelf. It's hard not to love a gigantic robotic prime mantis, and it definitely invokes the feelings of B-movies from the 50s. The 2003 slime border goes with pink and orange, which I think is even worse than the gray and yellow from the original. I think this just must be a hard cover to match because the best one I've seen so far was the red Danish cover, and even that's not that great. I do like that there seems to be some sort of pink tint to the mantis's eyes to match the title though. I was surprised the 2015 cover didn't go in a completely different direction, given that there are so many different monsters to choose from in this story. Instead, it settled on being a lesser version of the original versus its own thing. This mantis just ends up looking fuzzy to me and not great. A Shocker on Shock Street had more merchandise than I thought it would. We have a trading card, a really cool notebook that pairs the red and orange as well with some purple, an ugly journal that would have looked less awful if they'd capitalized the J, and a pocket scream machine that I'm just going to imagine has an actual recording of mantis screams. Our front tag says, "It's a real dead end," and the back tag says, "Talk about shock treatment." Neither of these tags really do it for me. I guess they felt forced to make both a reference to streets and the word shock. But now let's read the blurb on the back. Aaron Wright and her best friend Marty love horror movies, especially Shocker and Shock Street movies. All kinds of scary creatures live on Shock Street. The Toadinator, Ape Face, the Mad Mangler, but when Aaron and Marty visit the new Shocker Studio theme park, they get the scare of their lives. First, their tram gets stuck in the Cave of Living Creeps. Then they're attacked by a group of enormous prime mantises. Real life is a whole lot scarier than the movies. But Shock Street isn't really real, is it? Okay, let's start the summary. The book opens with our introduction to Erin and her friend Marty, and we're thrown into a confusing and apparently scary situation. Erin keeps going on and on about how scared she is, but won't stop and give the reader some actual information on what's happening. All I can gather is they're walking through the dark until they reach an old fence with keep out signs all over it. They hear scraping sounds on the other side of the fence along with heavy footsteps. Eventually, the fence starts shaking until it crumbles to the ground. We are then graced with this majestic creature. The monster came bursting out. It had a head like a wolf, snapping jaws of gleaming white teeth, and a body like a giant crab. It swung 4 huge claws in front of it. Clicking them at us, its snout pulled open in a throaty growl. Before the kids can get shredded by a wolf crab, someone tells them to sit down, they can't see the screen. So that's right, these kids got so into the movie that they thought they were in the movie together. I can see why they're such good friends because I don't think this is a common reaction to movie watching. It turns out they're watching a Shock Street film, which is part of a horror movie franchise. These must be some quality films because at the end of this one, the whole town throws the wolf crab in a boiling pot of water and then proceeds to eat him with some butter. It turns out this was actually film number 6 in the Shock Street series, so it's moving into Friday the 13th territory with this mini-sequels. After the movie, Aaron and Marty keep tricking each other obnoxiously in the theater lobby, and we learn that this was a special sneak preview because Aaron's dad does something in the entertainment industry and got them tickets. The two kids then stop to discuss how realistic all the monsters were in the movie, and that they can't believe they were just special effects. With quality monsters like Wolf Crab, Electric Eel Woman, and the Toxic Creep, I can see why there have been 6 films in the Shock Street franchise. Then out of nowhere, Aaron turns the corner of the theater and is attacked by an actual wolf crab. This is quickly shown just to be a promotional bit as part of the early screening. Aaron also notices a sign that says, "See the movie, then play the game on CD-ROM." So it's definitely 1995. We then learn that Aaron's dad actually has a way cooler job than just vaguely being in entertainment. He builds theme parks and designs rides, which is a lot of job for just one man. He's also a master of robotics and can build about just anything according to Aaron. We're learning all this because the kids are currently taking an elevator to the 29th floor to visit his office, which is full of toys, movie memorabilia, theme park models, and advanced robotic technology. This dad is kind of an improvement on the vague Goosebumps scientist. When Aaron spots her dad at his desk, he doesn't look very happy, and then he tells her he has very bad news to share in a chapter cliffhanger. What's this bad news? Nothing. It's a prank, bro. Gotcha again. You fall for that gag every time, he declares. The dad reveals then he has actually good news. The Shock Street tram ride is finally going to open, and he wants Aaron and Marty to be the first to test it. This tram ride is going to go through the actual studio where they filmed the Shock Street movies, and the riders will get to meet all the characters. He's also designed it to be as scary as possible, so we have a solid setup going on here. The chapter then ends really weirdly when Aaron asks if she can bring her mom too, and the dad responds by asking if she's feeling okay, and then stares at his daughter suspiciously. I was thinking, what, did the mom die? And she forgot? But we just moved past this in the next chapter without any more information. This does become important later though, so I'll give Stein credit there. The story moves right along, and we jump to the next afternoon at Shocker Studios, where we're preparing to start this tour. We learn this book also takes place in Los Angeles because Aaron notices a creepy fog rolling past the Hollywood sign. The logistics of this tram ride being inside a functioning studio lot has me a bit perplexed, but I don't care enough to think about it any further. Marty is pumped for this tour and is asking a million questions, and the dad has to tell him to calm down or he'll blow a fuse and won't survive the tour. He also reminds the kids to stay on the tram no matter what and not to touch anything. This is giving me Jurassic Park vibes, with this park tour destined to go wrong. The tram rolls up and we meet tour guide Linda, who immediately arms the kids with guns, shocker stun ray blasters, and instructs the kids to fire the weapons at any monster they see if they're in danger, but not to use them unless they have to. As Linda goes to hand Marty his blaster, she stumbles and accidentally shoots herself with a ray of bright yellow light and stands there frozen on the platform. Aaron is freaked out, but then when she turns around she sees her father laughing and realizes it's all part of the show. Linda actually isn't going with them, and her job is just to press the go button. She hits the button and sends the kids on their way, with their first stop being the haunted house of horror. Marty begins listing all the creatures he can't wait to see, which includes Shockro, Wolf Boy, Wolf Girl, Piranha People, Captain Sick, and the Great Golfer Mutant. I'd like to know more about these creatures too, because so far we're just getting monster names in this book without any proper descriptions. They reach the haunted house and the tram circles it before rolling through the front doors. Marty's been unimpressed this entire ride so far, and won't stop loudly complaining how nothing is scary. Marty actually turns out to be pretty annoying this entire book. The tram takes him through a haunted kitchen where pots and pans clatter around on their own. Marty then says Stein's patented child slang, thrills and chills, because this haunted kitchen scene just isn't doing it for him. The tram enters the living room where they're greeted by a mysterious voice. Aaron turns to ask Marty where the voice is coming from, but that's when she notices he's gone. I thought Marty hopped off to explore the house, but nope, he's still there. I guess this is just some very advanced special effects going on in this ride, where they've managed to make both kids invisible to each other while still sitting side by side. Aaron doesn't put much thought into how this is possible and dismisses it as tricks with black light, which I don't think that's how black lights work, but okay. The tram then takes them upstairs where they're treated to a surprise roller coaster ride through the dark hallways of the house. At one point they're moving so quickly and erratically that Aaron thinks that something had to have gone wrong because they're not wearing any seatbelts and they're nearly launched out of the tram at several points. Eventually they're launched back outside the house and the tram tour continues on like normal. Marty actually enjoyed this part and briefly stops complaining. The tram goes through the backyard until it suddenly stops by some tall evergreen bushes. Aaron immediately notices a pair of red glowing eyes peering out at them. She tells Marty, and that's when she realizes it's not just one set of eyes, but multiple. That's when the creatures come crawling out of the bushes and begin boarding the tram. The kids forget they're on a ride and begin shouting, "Leave us alone!" In response, they are asked by the creatures if they'd like an autograph. Ape Face, the Toxic Wild Man, Sweet Sue, a murderous baby doll from Mars, and the Toadinator all sign photos of themselves and hand them to the kids. Marty continues to complain that this ride is for babies and that having a bunch of actors in costumes is stupid. Tell that to Disney, Marty. Aaron thinks the costumes were awesome and very realistic. Marty just dismisses this as movie costumes and that of course they'd be better than regular costumes, so he remains unimpressed. The tram announces the next stop will be the Cave of Living Creeps, and they're launched towards a forest. They reach the cave and Aaron spends 2.5 pages talking about how much she hates bats and how there better not be any bats in this cave. She's in luck though because there are no bats, but then a big fat white worm drops from the ceiling and lands on her neck. Marty goes to touch it and begins screaming on the top of his lungs because the worm has landed on his head too. He flings it off only to realize it's actually raining worms. The kids try to dodge them, but it's no use. These foot-long worms keep falling from the sky. Eventually they leave the worm room and the kids are able to remove all the worms from their body in the tram car. Marty is now annoyed because the worms actually scared him, and he says he's going to complain to Aaron's dad. The kids conclude the worms had to be robots because there's no way a worm could be that big. It's probably also unethical to throw living animals at people as part of a theme park ride. The kids only get a few seconds of peace before they're pulled through a gigantic spider web full of hundreds of tiny spiders. They try to swat the spiders away, but it's no use. One even crawls up Aaron's nose and she sneezes it out. Once the tram is clear of the spider webs, the kids conclude that maybe the spiders and worms were real. It's the Cave of Living Creeps after all. The tram enters a large cavern in the cave and comes to a stop. After a few minutes of nothing, the kids begin to wonder if they've broken down. Aaron turns to Marty, and this time he's really gone. He then startles her from the cave floor because he's hopped out to explore a bit. Marty notices that the tram isn't on any tracks and thinks they've broken down. He suggests that they walk back through the cave until they can find someone to help. Aaron wants to stay on the tram and wait, which is clearly the sensible thing to do. Marty eventually convinces Aaron to join him and almost immediately regrets her decision because they suddenly encounter a monster from the cover. What is that thing? At first I thought it was some kind of machine. It looked like one of those tall steel cranes you see on construction sites, all silvery and metallic. But as it rose up on wire-thin back legs, I saw that it was alive. It had round black eyes the size of billiard balls. They spun wildly in its skinny silver skull. Two slender antennae bobbed at the top of its head. Its mouth appeared soft and mushy. A great tongue darted out between long bristly whiskers. Its long body stretched back like a folded up leaf. As it stood, it waved front legs, short white sticks. The whole creature looked like some kind of gross stick figure. Its long back legs bent and sprang forward. bent then sprang forward. The thick tongue swung from side to side. The black eyes stopped whirling and focused on me. Is that a grasshopper? I choked out. I think it's a prime mantis, Marty replied. Marty is very impressed with how realistic the robot looks and suggests that they head back to the tram because now that they've seen the bugs, maybe they'll start moving again. They start walking when another mantis steps in front of them and blocks the path. It then headbutts Aaron to the ground. That's when the kids notice there are actually 4 of these creatures and they have them surrounded. One of the giant bugs suddenly spits black goo on Marty, which lands on his shoe. It's so sticky he can barely get his sneaker free. Then another one spits black goo on Aaron's shirt and it burns her. That's when Aaron remembers the stun rays, but they're still on the tram. She then has a really dumb idea that ends up working. She stomps her feet at the giant bugs, which scares them off, because apparently even giant bugs are scared of being stepped on by people. This gives Aaron enough time to race to the tram and grab the stun rays. She also notices the crack in the cave wall leading to the outside, but after she squeezes through it, she hears Marty shout, "Aaron, help! They're eating me!" She spins around only to be greeted by April Fools, because Marty apparently has time for jokes despite almost being crushed by a giant mantis. Aaron keeps replaying everything they've been through, to both summarize the plot and to slowly realize that this stuff might actually be real. She can't tell Marty that though because he's too annoying to have real conversations with. The kids walk for a bit when they realize they're on the famous Shock Street, where all these horror movies took place. Marty is stoked to see his favorite horror movie sites like the Mad Mangler's empty lot where he mangles his victims and the Shock Street Cemetery, but Aaron is rightfully hesitant to explore much further and wants to leave just in case more monsters pop out and try to kill them. Marty ignores Aaron and once in Shock Street, he immediately falls into an open grave. He's uninjured and Aaron's able to get him out. That's when they notice all the grave names are things like Jim Socks, Bend Over, and Sit Up, which the kids think are just hilarious. Aaron then thinks she hears a soft crying from nearby. When Marty just dismisses this as coming from a speaker, Aaron then gets up from the gravestones and walks back to the tram, when suddenly hands begin popping out of the ground. Marty of course thinks this is great at first, but that's when hands start dragging the kids down to the ground. Aaron's able to break free by taking off her shoes, and she also stops to take off her socks because she thinks it'll be easier to run barefoot, which left me confused because is it really easier to run barefoot versus within socks in an old graveyard? She races over to Marty and manages to free him by taking off his shoes and slapping the hands away. She also demands he takes his socks off too before running. Meanwhile, the grave hands are all moaning, "Come down with us, come down." Finally, little green heads without eyes or teeth begin popping out of the ground, which actually motivates the kids to run out of the graveyard with some urgency. They race down Shock Street, and Marty finally acknowledges that maybe these robots are malfunctioning and they could be in actual danger. The kids run around Shock Street wondering why they can't find anybody, and why they can't seem to find an exit for what is supposedly a studio lot. Their feet also hurt because we're repeatedly reminded that they're barefoot now. They decide to cut across an empty lot so they can climb a brick wall for a better view, but end up riding right into a muddy pit of what is essentially quicksand. The two kids flail about in the mud until it's all the way up to their necks in a chapter cliffhanger. Aaron decides just to accept her fate as the mud covers her mouth. Then a strong hand pulls her right out of the mud. As she's on the ground coughing up mud, she looks up and sees red glowing eyes of Wolf Girl, who also happens to be wearing a tight silver catsuit. She looks over and sees Marty has been rescued by Wolf Boy. They begin begging the werewolves to help them, but all they're getting is growls in return. This causes Aaron to snap and she demands they stop acting and help them. She goes to yank off Wolf Girl's mask, which she discovers is not a mask at all. That's when she feels warm, fuzzy skin. The two kids race to the brick wall and Aaron ends up boosting Marty up on the wall. He then turns around and struggles to pull her up as the werewolves race towards them. At the last second he gets Aaron up, but now they realize they're trapped and that the werewolves will soon figure out how to reach them. Aaron remembers the stun rays and begins blasting at the werewolves, only to discover this does nothing and the stun ray was just a toy after all. One of the werewolves jumps high enough to knock Aaron over the other side of the wall, and Marty jumps down with her. They look up and they see the werewolves on the wall above them and take off running. They conveniently spot the tram and run towards it, with the werewolves just inches behind them. They actually get very close to hopping on it when Marty continues to be the worst and trips at the last second, causing Aaron to fall with him. Except this ends up being no big deal, and the kids were able just to jump back up and hop on the tram again, even though the werewolves were supposedly just right behind them half a page ago. Once on the tram, the two kids repeat how they can't wait to complain to their dad about this horrible park when they notice the tram is actually full of people. The heads all turn around and it's the skeletons from the graveyard all riding along on the tram like tourists. The kids slump in their seats and wonder where they're headed next. As the tram rockets further away from the main city area, the kids contemplate jumping off, but it's going too fast. They're quickly approaching a castle and Aaron is sure they're going to crash right into it. At the last second, the kids dive off the tram and barrel roll across the ground. Aaron looks up and watches as the train effortlessly glides right through the wall without any explosion. They hop up to check out the wall and realize it's solid stone, so they don't know how the tram was able to go through it. These special effects just keep coming. The kids have a mini mental breakdown where they wail about how they want to go home and they never want to be scared again. They circle the castle and find the rest of the road. They walk down the road and up a hill for a while. When they reach the top, they're briefly excited to see buildings because they think they found an exit, but no, they're right back on Shock Street, so they've somehow walked in a circle. Aaron then notices weird low clouds at Shock Street Cemetery. The clouds begin to swirl and move towards Aaron and Marty. Once it's closer, they realize the clouds are actually made of ghostly faces floating around. The faces begin to circle the kids and start spinning faster and faster until they feel like they're trapped in a fog made out of ghosts. Aaron then suddenly hears somebody shout, "Cut!" Print that one. Good scene, everyone. A man with a ponytail appears and announces his name is Russ Denver and that they did an excellent job so far. The kids launch into all the various ways they've almost died, and Russ just says those were special effects. Didn't anybody tell you we're filming a movie? Erin demands to see her father, and Russ is like, no problem, just head to Shockrow's house across the street and you'll find him there. Marty heads towards the house, and Erin stops to apologize for yelling at Russ when she notices a long power cord plugged into his back, meaning that he's some kind of robot and lying just like all the other creatures they've encountered. I like that they have the technology to make everything this realistic, but they still need power cords. What are batteries? Erin tries to stop Marty from opening Shockrow's house, where everybody who enters gets electrocuted, but it's too late. I'm okay with offing Marty at this point because his stupid ass has done nothing but wander into danger repeatedly. Erin watches in horror as there's a flash of white light and she sees Marty face down on the ground. She races to save him, but she's unresponsive. That's when she senses she's not alone in the room. She turns around and sees her dad, but he has a very cold expression and doesn't seem to care when Erin begs him to help Marty. Instead, he walks over to Erin, which causes her to do this in response. Help me, help mer, dad, der. We then jump perspectives and see Mr. Wright, Erin's supposed dad, shaking his head at the two robot children. We learn that he had the bright idea to create robot children to test out the park. He knew something was wrong with Erin Robot because she began asking about her mom the previous day, because she has no mom, given that she's a machine. So that's the big twist for this one and how it ends. Erin and Marty were never real, none of this was, and Mr. Wright created robot children to test out a horror theme park made of robots for reasons unexplained. I now remember why I hated this ending. Hey, Shocker on Shock Street shockingly earned its own episode, and I think they did the best they could given what they had to work with. Our notable actor this week is Ben Cohen because he's a Goosebumps all-star, appearing in 3 adaptations, Welcome to Dead House, Piano Lessons Can Be Murder, and now a Shocker on Shock Street. Okay, let's start the episode. This just has to be all the masks they made for various Goosebumps episodes, right?
Look at all this stuff.
I kept waiting for this thing to spring to life and they were booping it on the nose.
So real.
That's what makes a Shocker movie so good. The special effects are great.
This is reminding me of Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
But you said they were fake.
Oh, it won't let go!
It's too strong.
Get it off! Get it off!
It won't come off. Come on.
This little model already makes way more sense than the book.
The tram will even take you down Shock Street.
Oh, this is the best.
I think they're readers, not writers.
You're in for a scare.
Cool.
I like that they're forcing these kids just to do random shit, and it's also kind of full of Goosebumps Easter eggs. I would never hop out of a stuck ride. That's how you get squished.
Remain in your seat. Do not leave the tram. I repeat, do.
I feel like bats were the one thing we didn't see in this book, even though Erin talked about them a lot. I'm always here for special effects.
Shoot it!
Lots of random scenes in this episode, kind of like the book.
Whoa! Just like the movies.
How'd they do that?
More special effects. Piranha people make beautiful music.
The piranha person! Which one?
Another.
Please, help!
None of this is really working for me, but they tried.
Go!
I'm going to call you Erin 2.
Even robots.
Oh, Overall, I thought A Shocker on Shock Street was a promising idea that just didn't pan out, and was made even worse by a twist that kind of just throws the previous 27 chapters in the trash. When I finished it, I was like, well, that was a waste of time. That's not to say it didn't have some great moments with quicksand, zombies, werewolves, and a giant prime mantis. It just kind of undoes itself. The twist is hinted at a couple times in the story, but I still felt robbed because it just takes away any sort of feeling of conclusion. I'm gonna give this one 3 out of 5 tapeworms. I think this book had potential and was kind of wasted. Okay, on to our totals. A Shocker on Shock Street didn't have any vomit, asshole victims, shoulder scares, it was only a dream, or much of anything, but it did have a 90s moment. In Getting Jaded with the 90s, we had one 90s moment. This was a reference to a game coming out on CD-ROM, and just reading that phrase gave me flashbacks to elementary school gaming. This raises our total to 122 jiggy 90s moments. In It's a Prank Bro, I counted 3 pranks. These included Dad's bad news prank, Linda getting blasted with a ray gun, and Marty pretending to be eaten by a mantis. This brings our series total to 81 It's a Prank Bros. A Shocker on Shock Street had its fair share of chapter cliffhangers with a total of 11. I thought these cliffhangers in this one kind of seemed like fake outs more often than not. This raises our Goosebumps total to 436. The clunky cliffhanger word for this book has to be chapters 3 to 4, where the dad has terrible news to share. Just kidding. This was actually super similar to the clunky cliffhanger in Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes last week. Shocker ending. Our big twist of this book was the fact that Marty and Aaron were robots this entire time. Why they had to think Mr. Right was their dad, or why they needed robots to test out a theme park made of robots, was not explained at all. This brings our Goosebumps series total to 28. Well, that's it for A Shocker on Shock Street. I remember last week I thought I remembered this twist, but it was actually worse than I remembered because it was kind of like, haha, these characters never mattered, now the book's over, deal with it. Next week is The Haunted Mask 2, which I used to own, and I'm pretty sure I read it more than the original. Now, does that mean I'll remember it? Given my track record, probably not. Let me know in the comments what you thought of A Shocker on Shock Street. What did you think of the twist? How many times would you have sacrificed Marty? Which Shock Street monster was your favorite? Also, what did you think of my B-movie horror clips this week? Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
The pride. The love.